Hey guys, Will here. So today we're taking a look at an Australian-made set of sim racing pedals. These are the Simworx PRO V3.2 pedals, and as you can see, they certainly look the part. Now these sit a little bit higher in price than the Husingvarel Ultimate Plus pedals do, which we've long considered to be pretty much the benchmark when it comes to high-end load cell sim racing pedals. So what exactly are you getting for your money here, and are these worth considering for your sim rig? Well, that's what we're going to be finding out in today's video, so let's dive in. So before we get started today, firstly, big thank you to Simworx for sending across these pedals for us to check out. Now, if you do decide you want to pick up a set of these pedals or any other sim racing gear for that matter, we do have some discount codes and affiliate links available down in the description box below, or hit up boostedmedia.net for all the details on that. And that is an awesome way of helping support our work here at Boosted Media at no additional cost to you. That's what keeps us running, so we really do appreciate your support there if there's any sim racing gear that you were looking at picking up. But as is always the case here, no third party has any say in anything that we're going to be covering in today's video, purely just my own observations and my own opinions of the product. It's also important that you guys are aware we will be cross-comparing these pedals against a couple of other options in today's video as well. So just so that you guys are aware, for full disclosure, any products that you see in today's video were provided to us under exactly the same kinds of conditions as these pedals have been. So with that all said, let's get into this review now, starting off with some pricing information. So pricing at the time of recording is 2,210 Australian dollars, not including GST. So around $2,400 if you're here in Australia. That does include free shipping within Australia as well. And it also does include their CNC machined aluminium base plate and heel plate too. So everything you need, there's not going to be any hidden costs here with extra accessories and bits and pieces that you might need to buy on top. For us here in Australia, it ends up being a little bit more expensive than what you'd be paying for a set of Husingvarel Ultimate Plus pedals, for example. But those pedals don't come as standard with the base plate. So once you factor in shipping costs and whatnot, they end up being around about the same kind of price for us here in Australia. But of course, these pedals may end up being more expensive for you overseas than some of those other options. So just make sure that you're doing your own research there to make sure you're getting the best possible deal for where you are in the world. And don't forget those discount codes as well that you can check out for various different brands, including these particular sim racing pedals. So they're certainly not a cheap set of sim racing pedals, but as you can see here, they present as something very, very high end. Comparing just the out of the box experience and what we have here in front of us, just purely on looks, you can see they do look more expensive than a lot of other pedal sets that you'll find at around this kind of price point. And, you know, they give the impression that the profit margin here is a lot lower than some of those other pedal sets as well. Now, of course, with that comes a lot of complexity as well. More complex and more flashy doesn't necessarily mean a better driving experience. And in many cases, it can actually mean, you know, there's more things to go wrong, more things to adjust, and more potential problems as well. So let's unpack these in some more detail now and have a look at exactly what makes these up. Now, I don't normally include an unboxing section in our videos simply because I don't feel like it adds a lot of value, but in this particular case, I do just want to quickly show you how these pedals were presented, because right from the moment you open the box, it is a really high-end premium experience. They include all the tools that you're going to need, including a set of Allen keys and a nice high-quality ratcheting spanner, and everything is laid out really nicely in front of you, labeled clearly, and the instruction manual takes you through the entire process step by step, including what each individual component is intended for. So there's no kind of ambiguity, no confusion, a very seamless and enjoyable experience putting these pedals together. You know, it's something that I actually enjoyed doing, and then once it was all built, you're presented with a beautiful set of high quality pedals like what you see before us now. So let's spend a little bit of time now going through what you're actually getting for the money. Then we'll talk about the individual adjustments for each pedal, and then get into the driving experience and our overall thoughts on these pedals. So, in terms of the construction, you can see a mixture of CNC machined carbon fiber, 5mm thick, CNC machined 6061 aluminium as well. So the pedal uprights, the pedal pads, and the rocker arms are all 6061 CNC machined aluminium. The brackets that hold the pedal pads in place are steel, and then we have a stainless steel little footrest here on the side of the throttle pedal as well. So all very high quality materials throughout. You can see the nice high quality carbon fiber inlays on the pedal pads too. Now the carbon fiber will scratch up very easily if you've got sand or dirt embedded in the soles of your boots. So just make sure you're checking them if that's something that's likely to bother you. They do also have the option of some billet aluminium CNC machined pedal pads to replace these guys as well if you want to go down that road. Unfortunately, we don't have those here to show you, but they are an option on the website. We've got a powder coated steel heel tray and then a 6061 billet aluminium base plate, which are both included in the purchase price. Now, in terms of material thickness, 5mm thick carbon fiber for the cages around each of our pedals, 5mm thick aluminium for our pedal pads, and 8mm thick aluminium for our base plate. So absolutely no issues in terms of flex whatsoever. One thing I know was a bit of an issue with the original V3 pedals. They had a steel base plate, which was quite a bit thinner than this. And if you didn't have a support structure underneath the pedals, you did actually get a little bit of bending in the base plate when you push down on the brake pedal. Not an issue with this new revised design. So that's definitely a very nice upgrade. And as you can see here, just really nice high quality machining throughout here. It really does present as a very high end set of pedals. So we've got sealed metal ball bearings bearings for all of the pivot points. So at the base of each pedal arm and then in the back of the clutch and the brake pedal, as you can see here. And even though it will be a little bit difficult to demonstrate on camera because the table is going to move around a little bit, I can tell you that there is no unwanted movement or play or slop in any of these pedals. They are all absolutely rigid and solid, as you would expect for a pedal set of this price point. And the design philosophy here is very much that these are intended to be a training tool that can take daily abuse without ever changing its characteristics at all. So it's actually been designed and developed in collaboration with real life GT3, Porsche Cup and Supercar drivers here in Australia. So you can think of this as a professional training tool, which is also available to the consumer market if you want to pay to have that privilege. So let's quickly go over some of the interesting technology and design features of these pedals. You probably already noticed the cylinder that's being used here for the brake pedal, which is quite different from the elastomer stack that you'd be used to seeing on most load cell pedals. So this unit is a bit of a mystery. It is a factory sealed unit, which means if something goes wrong with it, it will need to be replaced rather than being serviceable. But they tell me that the pedals that are going to be shipping at least very soon after this video comes out will actually be using a slightly revised design, which feels identical apparently, but will actually be serviceable by them. So if something goes wrong with it, you'll be able to send it in and they'll be able to repair it rather than having to just replace the entire unit. But what we have here is essentially a combined pneumatic and hydraulic cylinder. So you can see this little vent hole here. If I put my thumb over that and push down on the pedal, there is actually a little bit of suction there I can feel in my thumb. Obviously you won't be able to see it on camera, but they tell me that there is 8 milliliters of hydraulic fluid or mineral oil inside here as well. And that is intended to add to the authenticity of the pedal feel. So we've got a 200 kilogram load cell in our brake pedal, and with the design of the pedal that allows for a force applied to the pedal pad of up to 140 kilograms. Now I only use up to about 70 or 80 kilograms at most, and I do like a really stiff pedal. So I certainly can't imagine a scenario where anybody's going to be oversaturating this load cell, and as you'll see later on, there's a huge adjustment range within this brake pedal as well. So we'll get into what all that means in terms of both adjustments and of course the driving experience in just a minute. Let's jump across to the throttle pedal now, and you'll see here a couple of interesting things. So you might notice on both the throttle and the clutch pedal over here, we have what's called a linear transducer or linear potentiometer. And what this is doing is quite simply just interpreting the pedal's position. So you can see as we push down on the pedal, the plunger system goes through the cylinder. And as that arm moves down through the cylinder, there's a change in resistance. That change in resistance is of course going to be exactly the same at any given point throughout that stroke. So it can then be used to interpret the pedal's physical position and therefore the throttle position or clutch position inside the game. So that is how that works, and it works identically for both the throttle and the clutch pedal. So they are position-based sensors rather than force-based sensors, as you would expect for a throttle and clutch pedal. We do see in a few cases, including the Husqvarna Ultimate Plus pedals, load cells being used for the throttle and the clutch. They're usually a lower rating than what you would find in the brake pedal, and they use a small little spring to exert force upon that load cell as you push down the pedal. And that works perfectly fine as well, but it is still a position-based implementation, even though it's using a load cell rather than physical force-based. So no advantage really or disadvantage of either one over the other. It's just a different way of doing things. These are sealed units, so they shouldn't have any issues with taking on dirt and debris or changing their calibration over time. But obviously, if you own a set of these pedals, let us know in the comments down below whether you have run into any issues with that over time. We have seen these exact same units used in other pedal sets in the past, used them for extended periods of time and not had a problem. So I'm not concerned about these in the slightest. So then on the throttle pedal, we also have a pneumatic cylinder. So this is purely just pneumatic or air rather than air and fluid. And you can see again, it's got this little vent down the bottom here. If I put my finger on it as I push down the pedal, it's very stiff. If I take my finger off, it pushes down a lot more easily. So basically what's going on here is there's a piston again, and then as the piston moves down through the cylinder, the amount of airflow is slightly restricted through the vent, and that provides just a little bit of resistance, gives you the sense of the pedal being mechanically connected to something underfoot. But unlike some other pedals that we've tested in the past where hydraulic dampers are used, it doesn't add any sort of lift-off delay or lag. So you can see if I lift off the pedal, it does just spring back absolutely immediately, which is of course what we're wanting here. We're obviously not wanting to have any kind of lag in the pedal when we're trying to modulate our throttle inputs. Now look, I'll be completely honest with you, most real life race cars aren't anywhere near as complex as this. It is literally just a pedal on a spring connected to either a cable, or if it's drive-by-wire, obviously some sort of a sensor, but this does have a very nice smooth feeling underfoot. And then we move over to the clutch pedal. Now this is what's known as an over clutch design, meaning that the force is coming in over the top here. And then as we push the pedal down, you can see there's a rocker arm that pivots around the middle, and that compresses the spring, as you can see on the bottom half of the pedal, and that's what provides our resistance. So it's a two-stage clutch, simulating that bite point that you feel in a real life car. If you've ever driven a manual car in real life, which I know a lot of people haven't done these days, there is a point that you feel throughout the stroke where the clutch plates actually engage with each other, and that just provides a little bit more sensation that allows you to get underway accurately. Now, of course, in a simulator, you're going to need to calibrate your clutch so that the actual bite point in the sim correlates with the rollover point on the clutch. That is, of course, simple to do in the software. Now, look, in reality, when you're just driving and changing gears quickly, you're not going to really feel that rollover point anyway. But if you are launching the car, it does feel very authentic, and you can adjust it, as you'll see a little bit later on in today's video as well. So that's a quick rundown on the core technology being used here. In terms of electronics, as you can see, two cables, one running from each of the linear transducers into the electronics package, which sits in a nice metal housing inside the brake pedal. And of course, the load cell is wired into that as well. So no issues at all with electromagnetic interference or anything like that. There is a USB-B connection on the side here as well for connecting these to your PC via USB. Now, you may also be wondering with regards to the electronics what the measurement resolution is. Now, they don't actually advertise this, but I believe it to be 12-bit. We did notice when we were in the software that when we pushed the pedals down and calibrated them, we were getting a value around about 3,500, which would correlate with 12-bit resolution. And that would mean 4,096 individual steps of resolution throughout the full stroke of each of the pedals. Now, that's not the highest resolution that we've seen in a pedal set, but I would certainly be extremely surprised if anybody out there can actually sense the individual steps in resolution when you've got 4,000 of them in a stroke that long. So let us know in the comments down below if it is something that you've noticed on lower resolution pedal sets, but certainly not something that I think should be of any concern. So what I want to do now is spend a little bit of time going through some of the universal adjustments that are available across all three pedals, and then we'll dive into more detail on exactly what you can do with each of the three pedals here. So in terms of universal adjustments, there's quite a few things that we can do here. You'll see when we get into pedal angle adjustment, there are quite a few knock-on effects from making those adjustments. So I'll explain that in more detail when we get into the detail on each of the individual pedals. But for universal adjustments, we do have the ability to slide the heel stop here in and out by about 20 millimeters. You can see with the heel stop all the way in though, you do only have 95 millimeters from the back here all the way to the front, not including that little curve here as well. So it is quite a shallow heel pad. I didn't have any issues with it with the heel stop in that position though, and I don't think anybody else will either. I've got size 10 US feet, so yeah, not an issue for me. In terms of the pedal tray, there isn't a whole lot of adjustment here. We do have the ability to move the pedals laterally, so we can move the pedals from side to side to get them in the positions that we want. That channel does only run from side to side though, so we don't have the ability to mechanically mount the pedals in a front to back offset position. Now, some people do like to do that for heel and toe driving. What I found is that with all the other angle adjustments that we'll talk about in just a minute, I was still able to offset them enough that that wasn't an issue, but just something to be aware of there. You do of course have the option of hard mounting these pedals directly to a profile rig or any other heel plate if you wish to do so as well. So you don't have to use their heel plate, although it is included in the price. I'll flash up on the screen for you now as well some dimensions in terms of mounting holes for this as well, in case you're wondering about that. But then you also notice these 2mm thick stainless steel mounting brackets front and rear on the pedals. Now, one thing I would suggest if you're assembling these pedals is do it the opposite from what we have here. We just copied what they had on their photo on the website, but if you put these brackets on the back, it will also allow you to angle the pedal slightly towards you as well. You can imagine if you want to have the pedal more upright relative to the heel rest, then that may be something that's important to you. So let's talk about angle adjustment now. So we don't have any angle adjustment on the clutch other than just the adjustment of the pedal pad itself, as you can see through the assembly here, which is also present on the brake pedal. No such pad angle adjustment present on the throttle though, just to note. But on the brake and the throttle pedal, you'll notice this little thumb wheel here, which is a nice anodized aluminium, and that is essentially adjusting the return bump stop. So as we wind that in, and I'm going to take the pressure off the pedal while I wind this in, you can see if I wind it all the way in, that angle is now very steep. Now that of course does have a knock-on effect. It's reducing the overall travel available in the pedal, as you can see now. We can account for that by making other adjustments, as you'll see in just a minute. So you can imagine now if we were to raise the pedal at the back, because the pivot point is here rather than here where it was when we adjusted the angle, that is going to slightly offset the face of the throttle pedal in relation to the brake and the clutch. Now I will also mention that if you wind out this bump stop too far, then you will end up with metal to metal contact. You can hear at the moment, we have a nice cushioned end stop, which keeps the pedal really nice and quiet. If you wind it out too far, you can hear now you get that metal to metal contact. So if you do find out of the box that the pedal is excessively loud, just make sure you wind that in a little bit, and then you'll notice that noise will go away. So we have the same adjustment available on the brake pedal. What I will note here is that it is quite awkward to work with simply because of the amount of tension that is on this pedal. So what I actually had to do was get my foot on the pedal and then get Tom to reach down underneath and make that adjustment for me. Now, it isn't something that you're likely to be adjusting day to day. It's probably going to be a set and forget thing for most people. So it's not really a major complaint, but just one thing to be aware of. It's one of, I think, 2 pedal sets that we've ever tested that actually required a second person for making that adjustment. So just one little thing to note there. So just to finish off, we do have a couple more adjustments available for the pedal pads on our brake and our throttle pedal. So let me just spin the pedals around this way. You can see 3 holes in the back here for allowing you to move the pedal pad up and down. We then also have a slot here, as you can see, for our footrest to move that up and down relative to the pedal pad as well. And then in the case of the brake pedal, if I spin this back around to the front again so you guys can see, there are some slots here on the pedal face that allow us to slide that from side to side by 35 millimeters. So in addition to the universal adjustments that we already looked at, there's a couple more things that we can do with the throttle pedal in relation to preload and travel. Now, we already saw how adjusting the pedal upright angle influences the amount of travel available. We can also adjust the travel without adjusting the angle by doing the following. So we take a 2mm Allen key, remembering that there are Allen keys included in the kit, and there's a little grub screw just at the top here. We can loosen that off, and then we can rotate this entire assembly. And you can see as we rotate this, what's happening is it's basically just extending the length of this, this assembly here. This is what forms our mechanical bump stop. So there's a little rubber O-ring around the top here that bashes into the end here, and that creates our nice cushioned bump stop. When I say nice and cushioned, I mean in terms of the sound that it's making, not so it doesn't feel squishy underfoot or anything like that. It does feel nice and solid. But we can wind that up, and that will reduce the amount of overall throw. Now, look, it's not the longest throttle pedal in the world already. You can see wound out, it's pretty short now. Winding it all the way back down as I had it before. Still not the longest travel in the world, but perfectly adequate for me. I didn't feel like I wanted anything more. So that is the throw adjustment. We'll tighten that back down again so it doesn't adjust itself against our will. Then we also have a 2.5mm bolt there, and when we loosen that, you can see this entire collar loosens, and this is basically just our preload adjustment. So we slide up the collar to the position that we want depending on how much preload we want on the spring. Now look, it is a little bit awkward. You kind of have to hold it with one hand in the position and then get the Allen key back in and snug it down. Haven't had any issues with it coming loose and sliding around on its own. There is no retainer there, so I was a little bit worried that that might happen, but yeah, hasn't turned out to be an issue at all. And that just means that initial push is a little bit stiffer. So that's everything else in relation to the throttle pedal. Let's skip over the brake for now and move across to the clutch pedal. So there's a couple more things that we can do here. Remembering again, we don't have an adjustment for the upright angle with the clutch pedal. That is something that's unique about the clutch compared to the brake and the throttle, but we do have a couple of things that we can do here. So we can adjust the preload on our cylinder down here, and that is essentially doing exactly the same thing as what we just saw with the collar on the throttle, making that initial press a little bit stiffer. And you can see it already is quite a stiff spring here, but yeah, we can just wind this collar in and out to make it even stiffer if we wish to do so. And it is purely just going to be a personal preference thing, but I'm confident that regardless of how stiff or how soft you want to have your clutch, you're going to have something here that is going to suit you. Then we also have this little thumb wheel on the back here, very similar to what we had on the front of the throttle and the brake. And what we can do is wind that in and out, and that is going to adjust the maximum throw or the end bump stop for our clutch pedal. Now, I can't mechanically pull this with my hand while it's sitting on the table. It's just too stiff and it's just going to bounce all over the place. But you can imagine if you wind this out, it's going to restrict the movement of this rocker arm here and reduce the throw. Now, the important thing to note here is that if you do want to get rid of or minimize that two-stage effect that we were discussing earlier, this is also a good way to do that. So if you wind it pretty much all the way out here, then what it will do is it will stop it before it reaches that second stage. So that's again just going to be purely down to your own personal preference. One little nitpick that I do have here is that if you wind this screw too far, this whole assembly does fall out, and it's quite a pain to actually reassemble again. You kind of have to hold the wheel in alignment while you put everything back in again. So it would be nice if they had some sort of a mechanical stop on the back end of this just to stop you from winding it all the way out by accident. So that is the 2 additional adjustments on the clutch pedal. You'll notice that neither the clutch or the throttle pedal have a ratio adjustment in the pedal arm. So now that brings us to the brake pedal, which is a little bit more complex. So we've already talked about the pedal upright angle adjustment, the pedal pad angle adjustment, the physical placement of the pedal pad on the pedal arm, and we've also covered in some detail the cylinder here too, and discussed the load cell and how that works. You already know that it is a 200 kilogram load cell with a maximum pedal force of 140 kilograms, and that is a ratio basically just determined by the arrangement and leverage that we have within the structure here. So what you need to know about this is just similar to what we saw with the clutch pedal. We have a rocker arm here. As we push down on the pedal, that whole rocker arm is pushed away from the pedal. It pivots down here and then pushes up on this little assembly here. So this bolt that you can see here is actually connected through the load cell. When we push on the pedal, it pulls up on the strain gauge within that load cell, and that is what gives us our pedal force within the game. So there's a couple of things that are quite unique about this design. You've seen before spring and elastomer stacks within this kind of assembly here. I don't think I've ever seen a pedal set that actually separates the two before. So this is quite interesting. So we have a preload adjustment here for our spring tension, and that simply just is by adjusting the collar in or out like so. So you can increase or decrease your preload that way. And that is just gonna make that initial press on the pedal a little bit stiffer or a little bit softer, depending on your preference. We also have an adjustment here for our elastomer. Now, the older versions of these pedals actually came with 4 different elastomers, 2 different shore ratings or 2 different stiffnesses, and then 2 different sizes, depending on your preference. With this pedal set, it does only come with the one, but you can also, in addition to the spring, increase or decrease the preload on the elastomer by rotating the little knurled knob on the top here. Now, in addition to that, you can also adjust the pedal ratio as well using this adjustment here. So you can see there's 3 little grooves here. The bottom is the shorter and stiffer setting, middle is the middle, and then the top is the longer and softer. Now, if you've seen Barry from Sim Racing Garage's original review of the older version of these pedals, you might remember he commented on the accessibility of this little knob here and the fact that it is quite hard on the fingers to adjust. And it does get too stiff to adjust with your bare hands pretty quickly. So if you want to increase the preload beyond what you can do with your fingers, he actually suggested putting a couple of washers on here and then a nut on the top to wind it in and out. But he also suggested to Simworx that they actually machine a little nut head into the shape of this knurled knob just to make that easier if you want to get a wrench on it and adjust it. Now, I don't know the reason why they didn't implement that. It could be that they don't want you putting too much strain on that elastomer. There would, of course, be a tolerance limit on that elastomer. But look, effectively, between the 2 adjustments here, you have a preload adjustment for your first stage, which is the compression of that spring, and then a preload adjustment for the second stage. And that would be where you end up doing most of your modulation. Now, what this means in terms of the driving experience, we'll get into this in more detail later on, but you have a massive range of adjustment here because you can tune each one of those stages basically independent of each other. Whereas in a normal elastomer and spring stack, all those forces are acting upon each other. So basically the weakest point is going to compress first, then the next weakest, and the next weakest, and so forth. So, you know, effectively it does work the same way, but it gives you independent preload adjustments for each stage, if that makes sense. Now, we can also stiffen up the pedal and reduce the travel even further than that by using the angle adjustment that we looked at earlier. Now, I can't demonstrate this on the table because, again, I can't push the pedal down hard enough to be able to adjust it. But you can imagine if I push the pedal down and then wind that little knob in as we saw before, that is going to restrict that movement. And then we can use the angle adjustment at the back to bring the pedal back into the angle that we want, but also taking advantage of that shorter travel and stiffer configuration. And as you can see here, you can go from as soft as I think majority of people that are looking at this kind of a pedal set would ever want to go to pretty much as hard as you can imagine as well. Pretty much like pushing up against a brick wall. So where you want to sit in that scale is going to be purely subjective. But what I personally would recommend is adjusting it so that you've got enough throw there that you've got a bit of feel, and then a nice clearly defined threshold point, as you always hear me say in my pedal reviews, so that you can modulate around that maximum braking force with precision and repeatability. So yeah, look, I mean, the takeaway here is that, you know, it is quite a unique design, but overall it does give you a huge range of adjustment that I think is going to cater for whatever your needs might be, whether you like a softer or a stiffer pedal. So with all that hardware stuff out of the way now, let's have a quick chat about the software situation, and then we'll get into the driving experience. So look, in terms of software, I do feel like things are, at least presentation-wise, a little bit behind the curve here. The software does, I mean, you guys can see for yourselves, it looks a little bit 2005, but that said, all the core functionality that you need is all there. You can save and load profiles, which is probably the most important thing on top of calibration, of course. That means that if you are running different calibrations or different non-linear curves, for example, for different types of cars you might be driving, you can quickly switch between them. And look, outside of that, you're probably never going to be looking at the software anyway. The calibration is flashed back to the pedals themselves, so you don't need to be running the software in the background to use the pedals or anything like that. One thing, or two things that I did really appreciate about the software though, was the granularity of the non-linear curve adjustment. adjustment. You can see on the graph here, there are more nodes than you find with a lot of other pedal sets, which means you can get in there and really fine tune stuff if that is something that you like to do. Look, for me, I generally just run linear profiles in that sense anyway, so it's not really a massive deal for me, but it might be for you, so it's worth mentioning. And I also did appreciate that they actually show the kilograms of force being applied to the pedal face for the brake pedal when you're calibrating it. The reason why I say that is because if you do lose the calibration for some reason, you can write down the amount of force that you were putting into the pedal for your maximum threshold, and that will allow you to recalibrate to that exact same value rather than just having to guess, and thus of course retaining your muscle memory. But yeah, look, really the only complaint is just that it looks a little bit dated. Simple as that. Let's move on now to what these pedals are like to drive with. Okay, so driving experience. Now, I've had the privilege of driving with pretty much every type of pedal set that you could possibly imagine, from the most entry-level stuff all the way through to insanely expensive active pedal sets like the SimuCube active pedals, for example. So, a lot of experience with pretty much everything in between there as well. And I've got to say that these are my favorite load cell pedals that I've ever driven with. Now, favorite is obviously a very subjective sounding term, and this is the area of the video where we start to get into subjective preference type stuff. We've already covered off a lot of the objective facts, and hopefully you've already got a pretty good understanding of whether these might be the right types of pedals for you. Now, look, it's really hard to objectively analyze the quality of the driving experience here, simply because you can fine tune and adjust these pedals to suit pretty much any driving style. So what I like and what you like may be two completely different things, and I can't say to you, you know, this is the best pedal set for you. You've really got to just determine it for yourself. But what I can say is, because you've got so much adjustability here, you know, I really can't think of any scenario where somebody wouldn't be satisfied with the feeling of these pedals. The clutch in particular is the most authentic feeling clutch I've ever felt in my life. I think the throttle absolutely nails that sensation of having, you know, some sort of mechanical resistance underneath your foot, but without adding any lag. The precision and control there is, you know, just as good as any other pedal set that we've ever tested. And then the brake, yeah, as we discussed earlier, with having that independent preload adjustment between the elastomer and the spring stack, all the other adjustments that we discussed. Whether you want to have this really soft for street car style or really stiff for formula style driving, you really have all the bases covered. And unlike a lot of other pedal sets, there just isn't really any compromise in any of those configurations. You're not having to sort of introduce movement or slop or slack, and you still retain that two-stage braking sensation, which is so important for establishing good muscle memory, regardless of how you set up the pedal, unless you go really super stiff, in which case you're not going to be really having that anyway on any pedal set. So yeah, look, I mean, it really does just have the bases covered. In terms of durability as well, I mean, you know, we've been testing this out for a couple of months now on the rig and had absolutely no issues, other than just one little issue that we had with the brake pedal. And that was that when we first unboxed it and started driving with it, we did find the brake pedal was binding up a little bit. And we did get in touch with Simworx about it, and they said that, look, it's probably because this thing was sitting around so long. And that was, you know, because we had it sitting in the storeroom for quite some time before we got around to doing the review. And in that time, we think that what happened is the seal around the nose of the hydraulic unit probably dried out a little bit, and that was causing binding. So we spent 3 or 4 hours driving with the pedals. That issue did resolve itself. It went away completely, and there was no more issues with binding up. I then left the pedals alone intentionally for another month just to see whether that issue would recur again, and happy to report that it didn't. So it does seem like that was the cause of the problem. At first, I thought it might actually be the spring slightly clipping the edge of the spring perch just here, but yeah, it did seem to just be that seal drying out. So look, I mean, it is one little issue that we did have. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a little issue, because it was a deal breaker for the first 3 hours that I was driving with the pedals, but after that, it resolved itself and it wasn't an issue. And they told me that they haven't had that complaint from anybody else. So, I mean, I can only take them at their word on that one. If you own a set of these pedals, of course, let us know down in the comments below if you have had any issues with consistency in that sense. But that was literally the only issue that I had in terms of the driving experience. We, you know, did all sorts of driving from F1 all the way through to, you know, street cars, heel and towing, supercar style driving as well, pretty much everything in between. And there wasn't a single scenario where I felt like the pedals, you know, weren't doing exactly what I needed them to do with the adjustments that we have available here. And really, honestly, in terms of the driving experience, it really is as simple as that. Now, in terms of the ownership experience, we did mention before a couple of little adjustments that are a little bit awkward. As Barry said in his review on Sim Racing Garage, it would be cool if they had a little nut head on this knurled knob here, just to make the preload adjustment a little bit easier to do with a spanner. It is awkward adjusting the angle of the brake pedal, because you do need to have some force on that pedal. You can't really push it down with your foot and adjust it at the same time unless you're super flexible, a lot more flexible than I am at least. But really, I mean, you know, they're not things that you're going to be adjusting all the time anyway. I don't want to make excuses for it, of course. There are other pedal sets available that are genuinely easier to adjust, but I just really like the design overall. It is a little more complex than other pedal sets are, but everything that we've thrown at these pedals, they've handled with absolute ease, and it is absolutely apparent in, you know, the overall design, the functionality, the adjustments that are available, that these are designed, you know, by somebody that really knows what they're doing, and a product that's been refined over many, many years. So yeah, definitely a big thumbs up for me. Absolutely no major complaints here whatsoever. But would I recommend them? Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a very subjective thing. There are other pedal sets available, and a couple that come to mind immediately are the V&M pedals that we reviewed a little while back and the Simmagic P1000 pedals. Both of those are absolutely amazing pedal sets that are gonna give you pretty much everything that you get out of the driving experience with these pedals. Maybe a little bit less adjustability, a little bit less flashy in their design, and maybe a little bit less robust overall, but you're paying an absolute premium for that extra robustness. And I would go as far as to say that I think these pedals probably are over-engineered for sim racing. Now, obviously, you know, given again the intended purpose of these pedals, they are intended as a training tool for professional race drivers, you know, and they want them to be able to take a beating day in, day out and never miss a beat. And, you know, they certainly seem to achieve that. Whether that's necessary for you guys, ultimately you have to decide for yourselves. But look, I would have a hard time justifying how much these pedals cost in comparison, particularly to the V&M pedals and the Simmagic P1000 pedals. Those are two of my favorite pedal sets right now in terms of value for money in that sort of mid to high end range before you start to get into super crazy high end stuff like this. But look, honestly, they both provide very close to, if not the same kind of driving experiences you can expect to get out of this. So if you personally see the value in what we have here, then yeah, absolutely no problem recommending them at all. Just don't go into it expecting that these are going to make you a faster and more consistent driver than something that costs, you know, considerably less than what you're paying for these guys. And look, honestly, I think it's really as simple as that. I certainly wouldn't recommend that everybody aspire to owning a pedal set like this, but if you are one of the lucky few that can afford something like this, you're absolutely going to be satisfied with it, and it is as simple as that, guys. So really hope that today's video has helped you out. If it has, please do leave a thumbs up. If you do want to pick up a set of these pedals or any other sim racing gear, do check out those linked down in the description below. There is, of course, a lot of Black Friday activity within the sim racing scene at the moment as well. We do have a Black Friday page on our website, which we're keeping updated with all the latest deals and discounts, so make sure you stay tuned to that bookmark as well so you don't miss out on any hot deals that are going on at the moment. But yeah, guys, that is it for today's review video. So leave a comment down below, let us know what you think about these pedals, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.